Podcast Network. I'm Nick McDaniel, and welcome to the Tapped In Podcast. But look, we're kind of going to shake things up a little. We talked about this a little bit on social media. We put it out there for you guys to send the questions in, and I thought, man, one of the guys who knows Georgia wrestling across the board, big scale, better than anybody, should come in and answer those questions with me. So I called in Action Wrestling owner, promoter, Matt Griffin. What's going on, my man?
Hey, it's as we tape this, 2 days until Christmas, and it's been a big year, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we wanted to talk about a little bit, was kind of cover Georgia wrestling on a bigger scale. Because quite honestly, I was joking with somebody the other day, and I said, I'm not 100% sure we're going to record next week. The week between Christmas, and New Year's is harder to record than it is actually the week, of Christmas for me. So we'll see. But there'll probably be an episode of some kind. But we wanted to kind of look back and kind of look at the year. And then you guys did a great job, by the way. We appreciate everybody who sent those questions to tappedoutpod@gmail.com. Not only were there a lot of questions, I thought there were some really good questions, and I think there might be a lot of meat on the bone for you, Matt, to talk about, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, there's potential for me to get tons of heat depending on how I answer those questions. But but that's only going to happen if they are good questions, so you're right. There are some good topics to think about.
Yeah, and before we get started, we always tell you guys we appreciate you listening every single week, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify for the podcast listeners, Amazon Podcast as well. YouTube is obviously the big home there at tappedoutpod.com. And but we still try to push you in a little bit of a direction because we did make some changes over the past week over on the Patreon page, patreon.com/tappedoutpod. At the free tier now, obviously you can watch everything when it's at its regular release date, but we've also added all of the TV, the PLE, pay-per-view reviews. They'll all be free moving forward, so you can do that free account. Obviously, you can support the dollar level. There's some things like show notes and some other things that you get at the dollar level. $5, you get the weekly shows early. $10, you get everything early. And also you get the digital version of the Tapped Out Collectibles that comes out monthly. I haven't forgot this month, folks. I promise you. I'll get into that one in a second. Because at that $25 level, you get the autographed 8.5 by 11 that we mail out on a single month. And I promise you they're getting mailed out. Had a hard time. I had these made. The guy who's signing them, we've kind of had two with my wife's surgery. We've kind of had a couple misses. So I may have a surprise for you for them running a little bit late for the month of December. I've been working on that as well. So again, they will be going out, and I'll let you know they're at patreon.com/tappedoutpod. Before we jump into all those questions, it was a really light week this past weekend. Not saying there wasn't good wrestling, but there wasn't a whole lot of stuff that we got to cover here in the Georgia Indy Rewind as we look back at, like I said, literally only 3 shows that ran this past weekend. Real quick, One Fall, they ran their show in Athens there at the Dalton Carpet Warehouse. They did a free show this month trying to, just kind of draw a lot of people in. It's rough. December's can be rough sometimes to run, especially when you get close to Christmas. I mean, would you agree with that, Matt?
Yeah, I totally would. I really try to stay, when I run a show, the first weekend of December because especially when you get on in the month, you have Christmas parties, you have people start traveling. Kids got out of school the 19th, which was last weekend, and plans change, plans happen, whether it's traveling. And that also affects us in wrestling. If you're going to go be with family, if you're going to go elsewhere. Just so with lots of turmoil, that's usually a bad time to run shows, or at least not the most consistent. So when I do a show myself, I try to have it the first weekend of the month if possible.
But look, I know wrestling was a staple there at Christmas. A lot of times people running on Christmas Day, and we'll talk about that a little bit on the Making the Drive segment on tomorrow's episode of the Tapped Out podcast, because there's actually, believe it or not, more shows running next weekend, the upcoming weekend, than there were last weekend. But let's talk about those ones that went down this past weekend. Again, One Fall ran in Athens there on Thursday. Main kind of storyline throughout the show, we've been talking about Cartello Grillo and about how they've kind of been popping up show after show, and not only just getting involved in like one match. It's one match after another because there's so many in the group. Again, they were supposed to have, KJ Impala was supposed to wrestle Mark Davison, but of course they attacked Mark Davison, Tyler Shoops, he comes out, he does the save, which leads into Tyler Shoup versus Hayden Seal, etc. You kind of see the way this played out across the whole show, leading all the way to the main event, where it ended up being Brady Booker, Tyler Shoup, and Mark Davison taking on the whole Cartello Grillo. And that's pretty much, I think, the strategy you're going to have to move going forward is just try to take them all on at once. Brady Booker, Tyler Shoup, Mark Davison pick up a huge win. Also big on the card, Jack Jameson and Drago. We've talked about that team kind of popping up on multiple occasions. It's a team I think is probably super dangerous. I know they both have their own vested interest in the frat house or in singles careers, but I think obviously that too would be a force if they decided to put themselves together on as a team. Check them out every single week on Peachtree Sports, Triller TV as well. Tuesday on Peachtree Sports, Wednesday on Triller TV. Their next big show is this upcoming Saturday on the 27th up in Hartwell. We'll talk about that a little bit on the Tapped Out show as well. SCA, they ran on Friday the 19th because they kind of pretty much run every single Friday there in Royston. There was a big street fight. Stevie Ray Frost defeated Scott Mason. Georgia Heritage Champion. It was that probably match of the night. Hunter James retained as he took on Nick Halen and Ashton Martin. Kristen Taylor defeated Jay Shaw as well. Everything essentially is leading all roads to Santa Slam, which is this upcoming Friday. Again, we'll dive into that a lot more on the Tapped Out show. So check that out as they've announced multiple matches for that show, basically being like the Friday night champion. Nick Halen will take on Stevie Ray Frost. Stevie Ray Frost will defend against Nick Halen, the former champion, and Hunter James will defend against Scott Mason, the Georgia Heritage Championship as well. And the big match being the Silva versus Alexander Lev. That's going to all come ahead. That best of 5 series will take place at Santa Slam this Friday. DWA also ran a show on Friday as well down at Krog Street in Atlanta. Basically, the whole show was a cage match. Man, I got to ask you a question. How challenging is it to try a concept where every single... Now, by the way, I understand the logistics of why you do it. Like, I can understand. But it's got to be pretty challenging to run an entire card just with cage matches.
Logistically, I think it's easier to put up, when I've had a cage match, it takes 20 something minutes to put up the cage and you're trying to do it as an intermission. You're trying to do a late intermission. I mean, it's logistically earlier. But I think, as long as the cage is in good shape and you can check it, make sure everything's good between matches, which I know that they did on Friday. And that's a good cage, so I wouldn't have any issues with it. Just, you just want to check the straps and just got to do your maintenance because you have bodies hitting it. But it actually would be easier to set up first because it's up the whole night as opposed to having to go ahead and rush an intermission and trying to get it strapped down and such. So I do think it would be easier. I think what becomes more difficult is match variety and do matches suffer because the tendency is to do a lot of the same things. And I do know quite a bit about this show as I book a lot of the people and I talk to a lot of them afterwards and that night after the show.
I think that was my question more is from a logistics. I understood that, hey, you put it up before the show. You don't have to, the time consumption to do it. But like I said, my question, for real specifically would be just the storytelling aspect of it, if you will, from a perspective of, if once you see one, TNA did this. They did a pay-per-view called Lockdown, and it's, like, hey, how do you make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cage matches different? So it's not like, hey, we've seen this over and over and over.
Well, I think the key is what defines a match having to be in a cage. Do you have to have every match take place in a cage? And with the exception of one of these, they were all multi-person matches. There's 6 matches listed here. 5 of them had 3 people or more. So that's a busy area because you're talking how many people you have in the ring plus a referee.
Yeah,
and that can create quite an issue, especially if you have somebody going for a pinfall. In a case where you might have in a 4-way scramble, you might have somebody on the outside. Well, you can't powder somebody to the outside; they're just going to have to lay again on the against the cage. So you're pinning somebody with everybody in there. And I know actually the first one had an escape match, which had a very clever finish. the first one. I did like how they did the finish, but sometimes you just have matches and there's not necessarily a lot of heat necessitating to be in a cage. So, creatively, why does this match need to be in a cage? Why does the second match need to be in a cage? When we just had the cage matches last month at Southern Honor, I was involved with one with Gary Lamb. Now, that match that I had with Gary is going to look entirely different from Joe Black defending the Southern Honor title against Alexander Lev. And, peek behind the curtain, we did talk with them on certain things, but realistically, Gary and I was going to be about hatred and heat, and realistically needed to be in a cage. And then Joe and Alexander Lev was going to be more of a work rate type of match. So that worked because we had two different matches in a cage, but neither of them were going to look like each other.
Yeah.
So, that's my concern. Why do matches need to be in a cage? Because now what are you going to do next time in the venue? Well, why don't you have the matches in a cage? Matches in the UFC need to be in a cage simply because people aren't going to spill outside the ring, and it's just such a visual. You could have similar style matches in a wrestling ring or a boxing ring in UFC, but the cage keeps everybody in and doesn't let you literally tumble under the ropes to the outside. That's a utility of necessity. I guess that's the danger point. Do you need these matches to be in a cage? And if not, why are they in a cage? Because a cage match is necessarily the escalation of a program or feud that has a lot of heat and hatred.
Well, one specifically match that I actually kind of made a joke about should be in a cage was the Multiversal Scramble with Krogan, Cruel, Chainmail, Lev, Teriyaki, and Darko. Krogan and Cruel alone, if that match was one-on-one, those two monsters, I'm like, put them in a cage. That's just the way that should be. And it was one of the headline newses coming out of the story, out of this show. Krogan is your new Multiversal champion in a match where Cruel entered as the champion and also defeating Cruel, Chainmail, Lev, Teriyaki, and Darko, like I said. So that was huge news. Also, Keelan Cole, he is now the world champion there at DWA as he defeated Grayson Pierce and Niji Ichiban with a little help.
Except
post-match, the Fade Area Militia, they hit the ring. DJ Bruner cashes in, and now he is the new heavyweight champion there at DWA as well. And so lots of news, with the titles, kind of moving around a little bit. Not to mention tag team champions, new champions crowned as the Fade Area Militia. They defeated an Offside, Heroes as well. So DWA, looks like they're in a flux of change with, wrapping up the year here with a lot of new champions coming in. With the talent like Cruel coming in, they're drawing a lot of eyes down there. So kudos, to the powers that be there at DWA. They're doing a really good job. By the way, Effie did appear post-match to announce that he was taking on the winner of Hendricks versus Herculon Rage, and that actually will take place now as Hendricks wins the match. Effie will now take on Hendricks at the next show there down the road. So Effie's another big name. So, again, we talk a lot about promotions taking some risks, taking some gambles, bringing in some, to try to make their card better. You got to tip your cap to them to bring in guys like Effie, Cruel, etc. into the promotion and doing, their best to kind of put their best foot forward. So, kudos to those guys. So.
Yeah, I know they're trying to run Atlanta and they're trying to get eyes on the promotion.
And I do like that area. You've obviously been to that area. It's funny. One of my wife's doctors is literally right across the street. So we go there, and it's a very unique area. Those district / kind of areas seem to be popping up everywhere. So it's a pretty cool environment. I try to encourage people to go check them out if you're looking for a good wrestling show, to go check out, go grab you some food earlier, get a beer or two, whatever, then walk down and watch the show. Look, their next show is obviously the 23rd, the day we're recording, so it's not going to, because they're doing the show there at that Brimstone. Follow them on social media, by the way, and keep up with their schedule, because they're running, I think it's every other Tuesday or something like that, at Brimstone, and then they're running at Krog Street as well, and they may be popping up some new shows as we go along. Again, like we said, not a ton of shows this past weekend, But, hey, it's not a show, here on the Tapped In Show. If we don't ask the question, who won the week last weekend? And I had two things of news that I wanted to kind of go back and forth. And I know you might be partial to one, but after we recorded last week, Action Wrestling announced that going to be doing Mania week again. First, kind of explain real quick, and then we'll kind of move into the other topic that we want to kind of vote. But I thought that deserved mention here to say, hey, that they win, because when you win, a little peek behind the curtain how we work on the show notes here is like a lot of times as things happen throughout the week, we just kind of have the doc started and we'll pop them in there so we can have these conversations. But real quick, Action Wrestling Mania week, just real quick.
Yeah, it was announced 2 weeks ago that we formed a partnership with West Coast Pro along with St. Louis Anarchy, New Texas, Pride Style, based out of Las Vegas, is involved, as is WXW Germany. And Pride Style is going ahead and kind of being our anchor in Las Vegas. And it's the new initiative. It's going to happen that Mania week of Thursday and Friday at the Swan Dive LV. And we're going back. This will be our third show running WrestleMania weekend. Both times we overshot the mark. We did very well in 2021. And then last year with our Action Dean show, I remember that night being like, yeah, I think we were in a pretty okay show, and then just being floored by the feedback from it as to how it was received. So last year didn't work out. This year it is working out. So I've got a lot of good ideas, I think, for running Mania. I do want it to be an action show. I want to feature a lot of our talent. I don't want to just go in and have, big match versus big match just because I potentially can, because they are in Vegas. But I want to feature our wrestlers who I use. We have a new champion. We have a new Action World Champion in Jameson Shook. We have Top Team, our tag team champions. We have the Good Hand, Shook D, The Wall, Casey Owens. We have Jameson Shook, who unfortunately he and Jaden Newman had to give up the independent world tag titles a couple weeks ago live on IWTV. Simply because Jaden's going to be on the shelf for 8 or 9 months, it looks like. So we've got a lot of our homegrown talent that I want to really go ahead and feature. And we're going to put that phone on mute and do not disturb for now. But it's exciting. I mean, we talk, Action Wrestling, as I've told you personally and probably on the show before, Action Wrestling I see not as a Georgia promotion, but a promotion based in Georgia. I see us as a promotion that is seen around the country and around the world. It's quite humbling to go ahead and see that fans in other countries like Germany, Japan, France, and so they're writing reviews and putting them online, and I have to run them through Google Translate if I want to be able to read them. And that's what we want. We have rankings and results in Pro Wrestling Illustrated constantly. We have pictures that we're taking at the Action Arena, at our shows of our athletes. So it's very it's very cool to see. We have a lot of people talk about it. I hear wrestlers in other locker rooms who make Action a goal promotion to get down to. So that's very cool. And, we want to culminate with Vegas with a big show. It never stops. We're going to do a show in Vegas on Friday, and then the following week we'll be right back in Tyrone live on IWTV in our home building. There's a lot of plans. And I'm excited for the future.
So that topic came up, obviously, to be, as far as who won the week. But we also wanted to throw in, it was kind of, happened last minute as far as, getting the news. Krogan, we talked about him a little bit there at the DWA show. He is the new multiversal champion in a match that featured, the current champion at that time was Cruel. And I don't care what anybody says. Anytime Cruel walks in a champion and somebody else walks out with said title, I don't care if it's multi-man, scramble match, none of that matters. that is still newsworthy, as that guy is your current MLW World Heavyweight Champion. And, you know, I know a lot of people, look, we've seen Krogan, he's feuded with Warden at One Fall. We've seen him appearing at other shows across the state. It was kind of like, I think, is this a wake-up call across the board that now, like, it was crazy that this guy was just perceived as, oh, he's just a monster. He's going to come in, he's going to feud with your, you know, with one of your top, you know, good guys. But now this guy's winning titles. That kind of shifts the focus of, you know, how you have to look at him. He's not just a crazy mindless monster. He's also a guy who's taking on some championships. So beware when you see him coming on your card. I've seen him on a GPW poster. I've seen him, you know, at the One Fall shows, obviously, here as well. He's starting to pop up in more promotions, so be careful. And because he does, look, he's got him, the record book show, Krogan won a championship, where Cruel walked in as that. For me, personally, I'm going to go, that's who won the week, because that's something this guy can hang his hat on for quite a while. You know, we see how Gunther's going to run with this Cena thing for how long, and Brock ran with that Taker thing for so long. I got a feeling this could be something that, you know, he can hang his hat on for a little while. So I'm going to go Krogan, and I'm sure, look, with all the great, you know, we appreciate it, but I think you would probably, we're going to go, that's who we go with this week on who won the week.
I agree. I mean, Cruel's been a big deal. You know, he was the independent world champion. He is often wrestling in Georgia on a Thursday night or a Friday night, and then he's off to Ohio or Iowa or Massachusetts to wrestle somewhere else. You know, he's traveling around the country, so he's a known quantity, a known superstar. So it's a big deal anytime he does a show in Georgia. Anytime he does a show in Georgia that revolves around a championship, especially losing it, that is a big deal. So it is a hell of a win for Krogan.
Well, man, that's our pick for who won the week. Now, I know a lot of people are going to ask, hey, what about the categories? What about the Mount Rushmore? We're not doing this week because you guys did such a great job in sending those questions in. We've got a lot to get through. We're going to try to answer them all, but promise you we are. We may not get through them, but we will see, right? It was kind of like I said, we wanted it to focus on a bigger picture, look back at 2025, not just a, hey, what about this, and that, you know. So we, again, appreciate, tappedoutpod@gmail.com. Let's jump right out of the gate, Matt. Chris from Atlanta says, looking back at 2025, what was the biggest shift in Georgia indie wrestling compared to where things were at the start of the year? I'll let you start, and I kind of have a take as well.
Yeah, I have a feeling our takes may be similar. You know, shift. I'm going to go with shift implies change and big change. So I'm going to say that kind of disqualifies, you know, action from most of it, because this is our third time running Mania Week, and we have several venues, and we've kept up with several venues. I think it disqualifies Southern Fried, who continue along in Monroe, doing great work. I think it disqualifies a lot of promotions, but I think the two big shifts are the explosion of shows from One Fall, the center stage show they ran in July, and couple that with they got on TV. That kind of triple play right there with those three things. I mean, there's how many shows they've run this year as opposed to last year is, I don't know the number, but I know it's significantly more. Successfully as an independent show running center stage. Obviously, it's one thing for, you know, TNA, MLW, Ring of Honor, NXT, or even Game Changer to run center stage. But a local independent show running center stage is a much bigger deal, simply because of what it takes. And then with adding, you know, their television product, and the television is well produced and it's good. That, to me, is the biggest positive shift. I think the biggest negative shift, and this is still to be determined how it's going to shake out, but unfortunately what happened in Canton with Southern Honor losing the building. Obviously, that was a place that I worked. September was the Lyle in the Action building. Did go to Reformation Brewery for November. Right now, we don't know what's potentially on the schedule. And just the fact that Southern Honor doesn't have a show every month is a really big shift, because, you know, there are a few hallmark promotions that are kind of the best of what's happening in Georgia, and Southern Honor is one of them. With that not happening every month, that's a huge negative shift. And they may start back in, say, March. I actually don't. I actually don't have a future date. I don't know. But let's say it start back in March and run every month, and they're able to duplicate what they did in November. Then things may stabilize. But maybe they'll find another building, and we'll be able to go ahead and replicate the magic and own the room like they did own the room in Canton. But those are the two biggest shifts. We don't know about Southern Honor, and just the absolute explosion of One Fall are the two big ones for me.
Completely, yeah. I'll let that. You answered it. That's it. That was the big one for me. And the shock of when we talk about the shift of One Fall, technically, I mean, I get it, folks. I'll go into the back or whatever. They're not even a year old, technically. That's the crazy part, right? Like there was another brand. You could argue that they just kind of continued on with a new name, but technically the One Fall brand itself, was brought back. Obviously, that was QT's old, school and promotion, but it had been gone for a while. So for what they've accomplished, and we were like, hey, that's in less than a year, technically, when you look at it. That was the crazy thing, and it was a small show, literally when they launched, right? And then by the end of the year, I was trying to do some rough math, figuring out the numbers on it. It's like, dude, they could probably run 100 shows next year easily. And, who knows, maybe center stage again. We'll see all those things play out. But I do agree with you 100%. That was the two biggest ones. And, Southern Honor was the benchmark for a long time as far as production value and things like that. How does that look? How does that shift and all that kind of thing? So there's a lot. There's some other things, but I glanced through some of the questions, so some of the other things will come up in some of the other questions as well. Let's jump to Brian from Peachtree City. Was 2025 more of a growth year, a rebuilding year, or a transition year for the Georgia scene?
Nick, I want you to take that one simply because, well, first off, I hope if Brian's in Peachtree City, he's coming to action shows because we run two towns right next to him. But I want you to take that one because as somebody who's in it, that's a really difficult question for me to answer because I'm consistently trying to, maintain what I'm doing now while adding things that make sense. So it's always hard for me to answer a question like that. So
a lot of people may not agree with my take, but I've said this as the year played out, specifically basically from June on. I felt like definitively we were in a transition year. And what I mean by that is when we started, in February, March area, we started literally tracking as many promotions as we possibly could. There was a point that we were at I think 42, 43 that we were trying to track. You've seen the list. I mean, you've seen the list out, some have gone, some, but when I mean transition year, it used to be, and I mean literally 2 years ago, we'll make that argument. Let's go 18 months to 2 years ago. I felt it was very, very easy to say these are the top 5 promotions in Georgia. I don't know that I would tell you today, though, it's not the same 5 anymore. And it's gotten a lot closer. I used to say 1, 2, pretty locked in their positions for the most part. 3 through 8, give or take, is a real crowd. It's a joke of the college football playoff analogy. Hey, there's 1, 2, and 3 are pretty, set in stone. After that, it's just an absolute mess. If you could make a case for tons of people to slide in slot 4 and 5. And I think the big one is just watching. I don't want to spoil because there is another question that leads to one of the reasons why this transition and change has happened. But yes, a lot of promotions I just feel like have, because it wasn't, to me, this is a tough one to swallow. It was not a growth year. I tracked the numbers of the crowds throughout the year. Most promotions, I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, most promotions were not growing this year. A lot of them were either regressing or staying the same. That is not growth. That is literally so that's, I could not put it under that. A rebuilding year, you could try to, but again, I just think it comes back to, are there promotions out there Viral, whose numbers have been insane all year? You could try to argue, but here's the argument. if you no knock to viral, like, but I get it. What I'm about to say is going to sound stupid. I understand that. But if you drew 1,000 at one show, and now you're back to 5, and 6, you grew from the beginning of the year, but did you peak, and now are you on the backside? It's hard to argue 500 or 600 is on a backslide, but it is from 1,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, are they growing? Yes, I would make the case. Yes, they had a great year and they were growing. Promotions like Apex, who there were people that were ready to pull the plug when they were under another name, and like, hey, they're just terrible. They're not going anywhere. That's going to fail, whatever. And here we are at the end of the year. I think they're doing pretty well, and they are building. They're building.
And all credit to Apex, because when they came back, and I don't know that particular promoter. I know of him, but I don't know him personally. There was a lot of people. I'll think of one person who I won't name very specifically, who wanted to dog out that promotion and didn't let them go through their growing pains of having a few shows, sorting out the venue, et cetera, et cetera. And now they've changed creative teams, and it looks like the shows are going great, especially from the talent that I've spoken to about it. So, all credit to them, because for Apex, it's been a huge growth from, I think their first show was in January, maybe.
I believe so. I think so.
Just in under a year, they went from not existing to having a show that was definitely could not have been what they wanted, and now they're right there. And it's also hard to measure growth now. I think attendance, definitely how you do it is the way to do, but a lot of promotions just find one building and they run that one building. How often they're going to do it? Every 2 weeks, every month, every 2 months, and they don't look to add events. So it's really, you're going to, in that growth standard, you're going to live and die on what that attendance is. To me, growth is like what I've done, what One Fall's done, Bullpen, Classic City. We're constantly looking to add venues and add events and try to do shows where we can and make inroads in other areas too. So, I think there's definitely, and it's if I had a building I was running and I was able to do a show every 2 weeks and draw the crowds Southern Fried's doing, I might just be like Todd and David and just say, this is good. I've got my, I'm running every 2 weeks. Why would I want anything else? Or like they are in Royston, where they've got the Royston Dome with their Friday show, and then they have and host other events too. So, there's definitely a couple different things. So, if you're going to calculate something like growth, I do agree with you. Show attendance needs to at least stay steady, and look at other factors. But the fact is, we got to go ahead and continue to add people and add fans, and you have to replace fans, because for whatever reason, you're going to have people move away, people who, their kids get older and they don't go to wrestling anymore, and they just decide, hey, I'm done going to shows. I have some fans who, they love the shows, they just have stopped coming, and you got to try to figure out why, bring them back, or realistically try to replace them.
Yeah, something as simple as, hey, my kid was in middle school, they play football on Saturdays. My kid now plays football on Fridays. We can't make the show specifically in the fall anymore. And guess what? We're all creatures of habit. If you stop for the entire football season, it's tough to convince them to come back once football season's over, because they built the habit of not coming as much as coming, to the shows as well. Let's push on. Andrew from Smyrna says, did you feel 2025 felt like a year where Georgia wrestling stabilized, or one where it was still figuring out its identity? I think that we've kind of talked about that a little bit in there. If it's in a transition year, obviously, I think if we were talking about the scene as a whole, again, the big picture, I think it's figuring out its identity. And the reason I say that is we talked about the shift from, hey, if you'd asked me this question again 2 years ago, 18 months ago, hey, here's the identity. These are the major players. And, everybody else is trying to, reach that status. There's still people at the top, but down underneath it, I think there's a lot of shift. We talk about Apex as a new promotion. Obviously, they started out as Next Level. They did they figure out their identity throughout the year? Kraken Pro Wrestling, another promotion that's come along. I think now they've got who they figured out, they've locked into who they are. They figured out their identity, but I still think there's a lot of little ones, and other promotions around trying to find that. But I have a theory. I don't have, in 6 months, ask me again. I think in the next 6 months to a year, there's going to be a lot more stabilization. Let's call it that. And I think, which means bad promotions are going to be gone. And the cream will rise to the top. And I think we go through these cycles where we have a definitive top of the mountain, and then everybody else kind of fades off, because we saw a bunch of promotions, not a lot of promotions. Now we're back to that bunch, and we're starting to already see, as I showed you the list. These are the ones that are falling off as the years of this year is going on. So I would still say everything's trying to figure out its identity, but I don't necessarily say that as a bad thing.
And I think that's a promotion by promotion thing. You have, like we talked about with certain promotions doing different business. I mean, I think it's going to go show by show and area by area, because in Georgia, you generally have these little fiefdoms where this is where, one show runs, this is where another show runs, this is where another show runs. It's really going to depend on certain things, and certain aspects you can't control. So, I think that's mostly going to be a promotion by promotion question, as far as, and when it goes for the whole scene, it's going to depend on stars, like who is getting and being on a lot of different shows, who is going to be somebody like Cruel this year. And I mentioned Cruel because he, a few years broke out into the ICW deathmatch scene. He's traveled around. He was the independent world champion last year. So who from Georgia, is getting out this year and getting to be more traveled, or who from out of the state is becoming a featured player here in Georgia. So talent-wise, that's going to matter as well.
Agreed. This is a unique question. I wanted to ask it because it pops up on the internet all the time on the national scene as well. Amanda from Athens said, did Georgia wrestling feel more unified this year or more fragmented, and what do you think caused that? Me personally, I know everybody's going to be shocked by my answer. I think it's been more unified than it's probably been in a long, long time, with everybody cooperating and working. Either now, like, shows running close to each other, it's not as big a deal as it was 4 years, or, well, I get my calendar right. That wicked COVID period where it's like nobody, but you know what I mean? But there was a period there when it was like, it was a downright brawl was going to happen if you ran within 15 miles of somebody. And now it's kind of like, look, it's just understood. Like, it is what it is. Just be better. Do better if you're worried about it. But I mean, specifically, and I'm going to use you as that's why I took the question. Sorry. That's why I jumped into it real quick. With somebody like you who worked, you worked at Southern Fried, you've worked with Southern Honor, you've worked with, Nathan Mowry in that Blood and Honey series. I know you help a lot of other people behind the scenes. I don't want to throw that. I'll let you do that if you want to, but it's a lot of cooperation and a lot of guys just helping each other, in one way or another. So I would make the case for more unified, but that's just me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's all, again, going to depend promotion by promotion. I mean, certain promotions are kind of doing their own thing in their own bubble, and that's fine. But I think it's, for years I've told David Manders, what's good for you is good for me, because that's a business thing. If he's doing good business in Monroe, there might be a lesson there that I can take down to Tyrone, and vice versa. Several years ago, I was on my way to a show, and David and I talked for 45 minutes about concessions at shows, just about the business of running live events, and the boring stuff, not the booking stuff. I've also done ring rentals for example, One Fall Wrestling. I've gotten in the ring a few times for them this year. Main eventing Southern Fried, main eventing Southern Honor is something that's very cool. You have places who are pulling out, who are pulling talent from out of state, places that are working together to go ahead and share talent and bring talent in. I have conversations all the time with promoters. Before he opened up, and this was the thing last year, Hanson and I had several conversations over the course of a couple of hours, because I trying to identify this is what I think will work for you in Tifton. These are the lessons. These are, kind of laying out what I think his steps are, and I'm happy to do that. Hey, if he calls me tomorrow, we'll go ahead and talk about different things. But I'm happy to go ahead and help any promoter who asks it. There's been other promoters and other bookers who've asked advice, and I know that goes on in other places. And I've also asked for advice. Todd Sexton specifically told me when I was signing up, nobody knows what we go through as bookers. Somebody I can always talk to. Dylan Freimeyer is doing. I know this isn't a secret. He posted about it, but Dylan Freimeyer is doing production for the TV tapings at One Fall. So there's so many things that go hand in hand of helping each other. And on a personal note, QT Marshall has done a ton for me, and Scott Barnett, he's a good friend, and I see him and we share stuff all the time, so yeah, there is a lot of hand in hand, because I think that territory wars in wrestling are pretty stupid, unless it's something that is really going to matter. But I think going ahead and declaring something, certain statements that people have made in the past is very stupid. Like, well, we're going to do this. It's like, okay, well,
I still think
I would much rather.
Yeah, I don't want to cut you, but I do want to say I do know and to me there's a right way and a wrong way to still do business. And that what's I don't say you're not gonna just move in 3-4 blocks from another show and run a show like the weekend before weekend. I mean that stuff like intentionally need to doing. It's a one way. I've had scenarios where I know personally they've come up and I'm kind of like, hey, the venue reached out, they want us to, like, what are you going to do? Like, nope, I don't want to, versus actively seeking out, like, I'm going to run this town next to somebody,
You have a conversation about it. It's either going to or not, but it's a business thing. And as far as running together, Action and Renegade, we're the first weekend having a co-show. It's Action and Renegade are hosting the Players Ball, and we're going to do an event simply because Renegade and I want to. He brought up the idea. Renegade and I are friends, and I thought that sounds like fun. And so it's finally going to happen January 4th. So we're going to kick off the year working with another Atlanta promotion. So I think the scene and wrestlers only have to gain from it.
I agree. I just think plus then it's easier to share talents, like you said. You can work together a little bit, plan ahead. So Amanda, I would argue we both think that it's more unified. Mike from Marietta, which promotion made the biggest leap forward this year, not just in buzz but overall consistency? Look, you can throw out some. We've talked. Yeah, look, you could throw out Kraken. You can throw it. Yeah, hey, look, we want to show some love for Kraken and Apex. We talked about that, but the answer is clear and without question, it's One Fall, right? It's just not even close.
Yeah. So since we already discussed them, I will say that what they're doing down in Tifton with Kraken is really good. They're running consistently. They're adding fans. What we were just talking about, they have, I know, added interest in their town from where they would have been 365 days ago. Now they're putting out on YouTube. They're putting out a weekly show. They're absolutely growing, and talent talks well about it. So they've become kind of a place in South Georgia. And I think too, the other place where we haven't mentioned yet, I'll say Coastal down in Savannah is doing. I know they're doing really good work. They also have their events on YouTube, and they're putting out really interesting quality events.
Yeah, agreed. Let's pick up. I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit here. Let's see. Marcus from Valdosta wants to know, what's the biggest surprise of the year across the scene? Like something nobody really saw coming. Look, are we going to sound like a broken record here? Because my answer is, if you would have told us in January where One Fall would be today, we would say you're crazy. I mean, as far as the explosion goes. So again, a lot of these answers, if we say that, we're going to try to find something else. So, but they understand. We've already talked a little bit, and they're going to come up a few other times, I'm sure. Is there something else that jumps off the page to you?
Yeah, and hopefully this will be able to pick back up because it only ran for a few months. But Now That's Wrestling, what Renegade worked with the Now That's TV streaming service to go ahead and put out some shows. They had their last one, I believe it was July. I was on all the events before that. July was scheduled to be on the day of the Home Run Derby, and I had to say sorry, Renegade, because I was taking my son to that for sure. So I'll say that was that was a big deal. All of a sudden to be like, hey, we're going to be streaming and bring in super quality talent, and then all of a sudden you've got a lot of talent wrestling against people. Like who saw Teriyaki versus Rich Swann coming this year, for example?
Yeah.
Who saw Donovan Dijak, Matt Riddle, and others coming in? So that was something that it's kind of off the radar now because they were kind of Now That's TV was kind of rebranding to do their own venue. They were going to go ahead and redo some stuff, and I don't know when that may start up again, if at all. But I think I'll say that's probably the biggest surprise because that was out of nowhere.
Yeah. And I'm hopefully they'll be back soon because, like I said, there was a lot of, Kayla from Ackworth says, which part of the Georgia scene felt the most competitive this year? Main events, mid-card, tag teams, or women's division? I'm going to defer to you on some of this. Actually, I'll let you start. I'll just let you go, and then I'll share some thoughts that are probably not going to be super popular. But
ooh, I want to hear not super popular talk. That's a tough question because I think that's going to depend so much on promotions. But I think I'm very happy with the explosion of women's wrestling this year, and I say that because we have a lot of women who are. We have a lot of real capable, good women who have started wrestling. In the last year, we've had Alexandra Quinn, Corinne Joy, Isabella Wilder, and also Kelsey Reagan, Florida talent, moved to Georgia and is able to take some more bookings locally. Just to mention those names, plus a lot of the women who've come out of One Fall. There's been a lot more women's wrestling this year, and I look forward to being able to go ahead and promote more women next year. Ravenna Vane took a very big step forward and has been wrestling a lot more. I know she did wrestle for Action this year. She wrestles a lot in Tennessee and Alabama as well. But I think we have seen a good explosion of women. I do think the main events are really interesting because main event, you can have main event talent up and down a show. It just depends on where you place them. Multiple times on our events over the years, we've had the first match on the show be an Action World title match. In fact, last year, the title changed in a match when Manders beat Alex Kane, and nobody saw that coming because the world title match was in the first match of the show. I think there's plenty of shows that up and down you could have wrestlers within an angle go from opening a show to main eventing the next one. Depending on how the booking is, I think that's the main event scene is exceptionally competitive.
Agreed. My thing with I'm going to rattle through this pretty quickly, but I will tell you, I think the main events have always been solid in Georgia. I've always thought that's kind of been one of the strengths. I think the mid card has stood out this year in a good way with some of these. Jokingly, like secondary titles, mid card title, whatever you want to call them, very much have become the old school mentality of the IC title back in the day in WWF, where it's like the workhorse, the work rate matches, with titles like the Classic. Look, say whatever you want about Hunter James. He's done a ton for that Classics Championship in Southern Fried, defended it a ton of times. If you don't believe me, he posted it on social media with a middle finger to me about it, about how that's the title in Southern Fried. And I can't look. I never said it wasn't, but he's done a great job there. That Jake the Snake Legacy title, the Chaos Championship at Coastal. It's like it's become one of those titles that's at a lot of these promotions. So that to me would be the part that I felt like grew a pretty significant amount. Here's the part that's not going to be popular. I feel like the tag team division has probably been one of the worst years that Georgia's had in a while. There was a long time where it was like, hey, this is tag team. And you could argue and argue and argue. I dare say Carly Bravo came back. Him and Shawn Dean came back. Now, there are exceptions to promotions. Look, Action does great with the tag team division. I 100% will say that. But we're talking across the board, across Georgia. I just felt like there's been a drop-off of tag teams across the state, guys. And I just feel like this was a down year for the tag team division. And if you're going to literally, I feel like, are you wasting an opportunity that you could bring in? You did not. Carly Bravo and Shawn Dean, to the infantry to wrestle. They wrestled at Southern. They're the Southern Honor. They were the Southern Honor Tag Team Champions, right? As it went, as the year wrapped up. They're at one fall on a regular basis. More promotions, can take. They told you, call us, book us. We're trying to do this. And I don't feel like a lot of promotions stepped up to the game. Says a lot about the promotions, not necessarily if those guys are putting themselves out there. There was another tag team that I spoke to. I'm not going to say it on the air. And they were like, this is our rate to wrestle in Georgia. And I went, what? And they're like, yeah, we're willing to take that because it's local, et cetera, et cetera. Tag team division time, raise your game. Women's wrestling, here's where I may draw a little heat here. I think the women's division is super strong in specific places. It's non-existent in most. So when we sit there, if I were to tell people, hey, I think the women's division is not as strong as it could be, it's not a knock on, I've said it on this show, I don't think the deepest women's division is going to be somewhere, but, one fall just because they have such a base to pull from, so that's a little unfair, and I say that. You're willing to bring in people from all over the country to work at Action. Listen, Apex, Kelsey Reagan is there. She was the recently crowned women's champion there, but it was also because same exact mentality. They were bringing in Izzy. They were bringing in, they're bringing in people from all over as well as local talents. And I think that's because the pool face the challenges. If a lot of people tell me, hey, we don't have a women's division because there's not a lot of women in Georgia, then bring somebody in from outside Georgia. That's your commitment to women's wrestling.
You just got to do some homework at that point and really try to get out. And, I'll admit it. Yeah, I could do a better job. I would like to be at the point where sometimes I've got multiple women's matches on a show. And sometimes it just doesn't happen. But I am happy that I can go ahead and pay attention and see that there are things. It's a totally different scene for me a couple of years ago. I will say as a promoter, it can be tough when you have changes in, on certain shows, but you've got to be able to go ahead and roll with it. And, I want to promote women's wrestling. I used to do a lot of intergender wrestling, and I had a lot of fans tell me that it was fine, but they wanted to see two women wrestle. And I'm like, yeah, I agree with you. Let's try to go ahead with that. And so I've really specifically tried to promote women's wrestling. And I have some ideas on some talent for some upcoming shows as well. So I think that just depends on the promoter mindset.
Rob from Stockbridge wants to know, do you think Georgia wrestling benefited more from established names staying local or from newer talent stepping up? I'll let you start there.
Yeah, it's pretty much always going to be newer talent stepping up because we're always going to have local talent. Boy, this is not going to go over great, but I don't mind if somebody wants to be just a local wrestler. If you only got into wrestling and you want to be home every night and you want to be a 40-miler, I don't mind. But you have to understand what that encompasses. And it means that people outside your area are probably not going to know you. And if they do, it's not going to be based on your personal strength or talent. It's going to depend on the promotion and how many eyes there are on that particular promotion. If you just work for some shows who don't put anything out there, never write a press release, have a dormant social media, you could be, a world-class wrestler. Nobody's going to know it or see it. But I know certain people who watch my show, and people are going to see it. I think definitely that, though, that newer talent coming in and forcing themselves to be seen. I mean, I love it when you do something in like a well, I had them for one booking, and now I've got to give them a lot more shows. I'll go ahead and use somebody in this example for newer talent stepping up. Is Grayson Pierce this year? Grayson Pierce is a extremely versatile wrestler. He's a heel who actually gets heat. Just walk out and say, boo me, and people stare at him. He's been Southern Honor. He's been in Action, several other promotions, and he's somebody who's an example of stepping up. I mean, you can also look at he doesn't live in Georgia. You can also look at what's happened over the last year with Tim Bobby at Action. He wasn't an Action wrestler, and last December he came in as the world champion in Chattanooga at TWE. That's as unique a situation as you'll see. And okay, how do we debut him? How do we make this work? How do we, and he completely, that it was not something that was particularly planned to happen. We did have plans to use him, but that storyline wasn't set. But when he came in, he took advantage of it. He exploded. He had great matches. For example, he had a couple of great matches with Adam Priest, a couple of great matches with Darian Bankston. He's somebody who really bit his teeth, and to what he could do. And as Action champion, he got out. He defended it in, I know I'm going to forget some states, but he defended it in Texas, Indiana, Tennessee, and there's a couple other states that I'm not thinking of right now, Alabama. So, I think definitely it's going to be newer talent that finally hit that second gear, finally figure out, okay, this is what I need to do to get over. And their ring quality, their match quality hits a certain level where, yeah, I want to bring this guy in. And on the women's side, I mean, Corinne Joy, for example, is somebody who's also getting out there, and she's got eyes on her, is all I'll say.
Yeah, I think it's always got to be new, because one of the comments that I make on the show, and I always tell people, it's a compliment or it's an insult, depending on perspective of who I'm saying it to. And what I mean by it is I go, this person will be the best wrestler and one of the best wrestlers in Georgia for the next decade. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? It's all perspective of what they want and where they want to be. But new talent stepping up is it's always going to be what I think we need to see on a regular basis. Next question hits home on a lot of people here. Jeff from Warner Robins, how important is a building or a venue to the success of the show? Huge, in my opinion, and just from the perspective, we talked about one of the biggest stories in Georgia, Southern Honor losing their venue. Look, a lot of these people that were running, even a company, look, One Fall's not, exempt from this rule. The Cumming location closes. The Tannery Row in Buford closes. So having a good, steady venue is probably one of the most important things, because at least where home's going to be on a regular basis. Specifically, if you can achieve that in multiples, and it's one of the reasons why I think One Fall's had their opportunity. I think, it's one of the reasons Action has, a huge, advantage as well. If you lose one venue, but you have 3, 4, 5, 7, whatever, you're in you're better positioned to not one venue closing doesn't basically stop you in your tracks. So I think, would you say consistency of a venue is probably the most important thing?
I mean, consistently being able to book the venue. Also, certain things you can't control. The building is important because of what aesthetics do you have in the building. Certain buildings you have are going to keep all the sound in, so you could have a small amount of people making noise, and it's going to sound like triple the amount. It's going to sound bigger than it is. You also have other venues where you may put a lot of people in it, but sound goes to die. And it doesn't seem like there's people who are interested in the show. It's simply, are people going to want to see a wrestling show in this particular building? It's a huge part of it. There's so many variables, and you don't necessarily know how it's going to be. I mean, the fact that I run shows in every 2 months in a brewery is a really cool thing for us. I mean, we have our own essentially room that we can use as an arena. People can go ahead and leave and get a beer between matches. There's 2 places right outside the door of our arena where you can get dinner or dessert, because they have those in the brewery. I mean, it's a venue. It's so self-contained. You can park yourself there and never have to leave.
Yeah.
And it's a great area. It feels like a packed room to watch shows. Everybody can be seen. So it's being able to work with a venue, but also whatever the venue aesthetics are all important.
And I just am always a big, like, hey, is the venue, because that was the brewery thing took off for a while, but now that we're seeing a lot of them not stay in business, to be blunt, people are losing those venues, and it's always like, hey, where's a better, like a more consistent venue that you can run? I think it's that's why, again, I'm a consistency more than anything. But yes, getting one that meets your needs as well. Dustin from LaGrange, Georgia, right there in your neck of the woods and over there, what part of the business side of wrestling do you think fans still underestimate the most? I'll let you handle that because I don't run a show.
Oof. I think it's the bookers and promoters who can really answer that one. And a lot of people seem to think they want to know what happens to put a show together. And to put a show together is so much less on the booking side, so much more on the logistical side and the promotion side. How far can the ring truck be away? Can you get close to the building, or are you going to have to walk? How much of a pain in the neck is setup going to be if it's raining? What are the logistical drawbacks that I have to this? I think the actual logistical issues of running an event successfully are so key. I mean, I've had it where, hey, you need a ring bell. Hey, somebody forgot a ring bell. Okay, I got one. Hey, they need a microphone. Okay. There was a show last year where thankfully I had my microphone and sound equipment in my truck with me, and they were able to borrow it because they just didn't have one. I think people underestimate what actually physically has to go into the hours before a show, setting it up. And that doesn't even talk about what happens in the weeks before the show with posters, with flyers, with social media advertising, how to draw the house. So sometimes fans will see they just want to sit in on a booking meeting, which is, for me, never going to happen. They just want to sit in and see how that happens. I mean, and sometimes logistical nightmares of like, okay, call time is 5. This car is going to be here at 7:30, which is bell time. There's been multiple cases where I had to switch stuff around. Last show, my Action Dean show, Mania Weekend in Jersey, they had a whiteboard in the building. Well, I ended up having to go ahead and erase numbers. At one point, I literally had to look because a bridge got shut down from Philly to Jersey. I literally had to look and see who I had in the venue and who could go, because it's like, okay, Tom Lawler's going to get here really, really late. Tom Lawler got there so late that, well, he was wearing a suit to do a commentary for Stardom earlier that day. It's like, well, it's Tom Lawler. Nobody's going to care if he dresses. He literally went out and did a street fight with Jade Newman and Tank in a suit. So it's all those aspects that are the difficult things, the things you sometimes can't control.
Total chaos. That's why you got to have a good person in logistics. And I think the ones that are doing it successfully kind of show, and it's probably because they have somebody strong in that position. Kevin from Dalton, was 2025 a strong year for tag team wrestling in Georgia, in your opinion? I think we probably already addressed that a little bit when we talked about the tag team wrestling. My answer is, from a case-by-case basis, you could argue there was a yes in some promotions. But across the scene in the entire state of Georgia, my answer was no, it was not a strong one.
I'd agree with you, no, there. I do think for Action, I was really happy with overall, because we had a strong heel team in the Good Hand. I had a strong babyface team that I was able to build in Top Team. 4825 won the world independent titles, and they were going to be on a run, but Jay Newman got injured. We also saw the Wonder Boys, who I've only been able to use once, but I really like them. They've come to the forefront. I've also, I need to get back, I had the It couple, BK Westbrook and Ella Envy, come in. And so I need to go ahead. I need to go ahead and continue to work on booking tag teams. But I would say as a scene overall, yeah, because when I look out there, I'm looking often at other states or for other teams to step up their game. But 2026 could always be a better year.
Absolutely. Larry from Noonan, he wants to know what mattered more in 2025, match quality or long-term storytelling. I'm going to give you my answer from a fan perspective. To me, it's always storytelling. Matches are great. Over time, typically, matches are forgotten. It takes something so exceptional for a match that you're going to remember the match itself, just a non-story involved match 5 years from now. But the storytelling itself strikes the nerve, strikes the emotion, strikes a memory. Those last way longer. We can all tell you the stories that we loved as kids, teenagers specifically. We say somebody, hey, what was the height of the Attitude Era? You'll hear guys go like, oh, it was Austin and Rock, well, which was your favorite match? And then they have to sit there and think about it. It's something to that effect, greatest WrestleMania match, in my opinion, of all time, Rock Hogan. Why was it the best match? Because I just remember it so well. It wasn't the match. The match is actually not very good as far as a wrestling perspective goes, as far as the match, work rate, if you want to call it that. But we all cared about emotion. So I would always argue, if you're not telling good stories, I don't think you're going to, build the long-term, like the fans don't get invested. You've personally been involved with one, Gary Lamb, David, man, it's, I don't know, with no insult to you, hopefully, I wouldn't think that you would say that your match with Manders or your match with Gary Lamb, etc., were 5-star classics that Meltzer's going to write, 3 paragraphs about. But we're all going to remember those matches, right? That's the kind of what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, it's for me, when I get into the ring, I'm always looking for interesting challenges. Challenges are going to be revolving around storytelling rather than match quality. Now, if they go hand in hand, and they do for me, but I want to use that storytelling to get a great into a higher level. The match that we promoted of the year was Darian Bankston winning the world championship against Tim Bosby. That was the 5th time they both here in Georgia and for that championship, and we were able to go ahead. They had a classic match. All the Southern independent wrestling bullshit. We had 3 rings bumped. We had Bosby manager Dylan Hales get literally tossed off of the stage and take a bump to the floor. We had myself getting involved as a referee and getting bumped. And then finally Darian finally winning after chasing for the title. It was a really good match, but it got elevated because we were going ahead with all these elements and bringing it in. Same thing with Top Team and the Good Hand when Top Team was chasing, and then Alex Kane turned babyface and he formed A South with Teriyaki and Jay Lucas. Those were good matches with Top Team and the Good Hand. Especially mixing in Alex Kane in there, like we just did with a 6-man. But when you have the storytelling and people care about the characters, they want to boo the heels and cheer the faces. It elevates it absolutely so much more.
Yeah, I think that's why, look, it's who Southern Fried's built a franchise on at Southern Fried. It's what, we talk about with Todd Sexton. It's one of the absolute strengths that he has is storytelling, and that's why they are who they are. You look across and that's, by the way, multiple within one show. They're running, you've got Crusade, you've got, pick a story. There's usually multiple layers, run in there, and it's kind of one of their strengths. Look, people ask me, why do I think Kraken has, growth? It's because they sit there and they write, it's planned out for months and weeks at a, just weeks, months, whatever at a time. They ran a tag team tournament that lasted 9, almost 10 months, so that's clearly got to be planning and story, so again, lots of stuff like there. Look, it's going to tie into some of the, next question. Roger from Powder Springs, what were some of the best stories in Georgia this year? Look, somebody can make the case for, Alexander Lev's rise at Southern Honor, right? When he got there, look, let's be full. I don't think this is speaking out of turn. When he first debuted there, nobody saw it coming, and it just organically played out as a story, and it built and built and built to, he dethrones Joe Black, as the champion. And like you said, it was because why? It's because by the time that happened, everybody was invested in him, his growth and his build. He came up short. He was the underdog. He fought, comes up short one match, but he comes back again, earns that right. Boom, he's back again. But again, I think, look, some of the best stories are what they are, right? It's not about the matches in the sense of, look, I'm not blowing smoke up. Look, Gary Lamb versus, Matt Griffin, David Manders versus Matt Griffin. Look, Nathan Mowry and Deathmatch Wrestling versus Matt Griffin, right? It's clearly your take is it's always going to be more story than the matches. Do you have to go out there and deliver? Sure, you have to deliver. But what does that look like? Looks different from case to case basis.
Yeah, I mean it's, and I mean as far as the best stories of the year, I feel like you just brought up. I feel like I've been very happy with the ones that I've been in with. As far as the are they the best of the year is something that I'm not qualified to discuss, but I know that storytelling, everything that I'm personally going to be involved with is going to matter. Since Blood and Honey started last year, we had the idea. It's like, all right, I love deathmatch wrestling. I want to do it. I partnered with Nathan Mowry, and we kind of came out with I'm the anti-deathmatch guy. And then over the last set, as that evolved, that was very cool because I could stay a heel, and people fucking hated me. People hated me in Canton. People hate if I got strung up, and tortured and murdered, you'd have people lining up to stay to me. It's because for whatever reason the stories we were doing made people care, and I think the Lev story of his rise is one of the great ones. And I know that took a long time. It's just simply because Lev didn't do anything but the most important thing. He got over. He was just a guy. He started getting over. That's when you have the opportunity to be able to go ahead and have good matches. If you're not over, you really don't have that. I tell a lot of the young kids, like, all right, you could wrestle for 10 minutes, but you're not going to. You might wrestle for 5. I need to see what you can do in 5 minutes that makes me want to give you 8 to 10, 12-minute matches. So if you can't master a 5-minute match, I'm certainly not going to give you a 10-minute match. And Lev did all of those things. He was just just a body brought in, but he continually got over show after show. And then when the turn happened, it was a huge deal, and they were ready. The crowd, I mean, probably the easiest booking Dylan Frommer's ever had to do is to make the decision. It's just like when, because the crowd was ready to see it and they wanted it. And that's what we do in wrestling. We kind of hold off anticipation, build something, and then give it to you in the best way we possibly can.
And sometimes I think promotions are like, they're too eager to pull the trigger. And sometimes the best storytelling, like for example, we talked about this a little bit. Look, why are you so intrigued with Kraken? Because they also did a year-long story of Trevor Aon climbing to capture the championship. So they could have made the easy thing. The fans wanted it probably 4 or 5 months into it, but make it build and build. And when they wins, they go bananas because it's a tricky game. And I understand that you would know more than I would on this about when's the right time. Can you wait too long? Sure. Can you do it too soon? Sure. Finding that sweet spot somewhere in the middle is the challenge. But I think that's the storytelling part. And you got to have somebody who can. And I think some of that also, by the way, is having the steps planned out to where you know when the time is right. Because is there more meat on the bone to play? So those would be some of ours that we would throw out there. I think some of the ways when you're talking about getting over, Tyler from Kennesaw asked, overall, did social media help or hurt Georgia indie wrestling this year? You'll probably have a field day with this one. I think at times wrestlers hurt themselves. But I'll let you start and then I'll finish up with it. But
I don't like when wrestlers are a total geek on social media. I feel like that a lot of times they're posting absolute dork stuff, and they need to work their social medias or make a separate one. I mean, you have to work it, because if you're coming in to wrestle for me, what are you bringing me? I don't need got talent who can wrestle. I have that. I have literally, I won't show you, but I have lists here of different things. Of different shows and different aspects I want, and people I want to bring in from in-state and from out of state. I don't want you to go ahead and be a geek so that if somebody is following you on social media, you're mistyping things on one day and then you're posting about your shitty job the next. Hey, even me, nobody knows in Georgia wrestling unless I specifically tell them what I do as a shoe job. Everything is listed that I'm a wrestling promoter, and I've appeared in some TV commercials, and I have an acting. I have a bit of an acting background and an agent. That's it. That looks like good stuff. I post pictures of my family. I go ahead and talk about wrestling, and I really, I'm very careful what I talk about with wrestling too. There's lots of people who go ahead and get themselves heat and make themselves look minimal. What I need somebody to do as a wrestler is use your social media to bring up a crowd. Because if I have, for example, if I have a wrestler who comes in from Massachusetts, which I just did several last show, they came from the Northeast. I am not just booking that person to come in and wrestle. I am bringing their social media, because we're live on IWTV. They're going to talk about their match. They're going to tweet about it. They're going to go ahead and they're going to go ahead and share it with their audience. So I need somebody to go ahead and bring me an audience. I don't just need, hey, I'm a young kid and I wrestle. Okay. What else you got? So you need to have a lot of tools in the toolbox to be able to pull out. The easiest way as a young kid is to be super helpful. Some of the young wrestlers who don't have big social media followings, they get FaceTime with me by coming to shows early, helping me set up, actually talking to me, and I'm able to give opportunities based off of that. I mean, all my champions right now, tag team champions and the world champion, I met them in that regard. That they came in and assisted, and I got to meet them that way. And
so let me ask you this: do you think, specifically to hit it? Then I at times agree with you. This is not a popular take. I have 2 separate accounts: my regular personal life, and then podcast Nick, as I like to call it, has his own page. I wish people would stop tagging me in personal. But that's a whole other conversation. But it's you need to have your wrestling persona page, and then you could use your real name over here, and it's your person. Try to do your best to keep them apart. You can, by the way, it's not super difficult. But then you'll have on the flip side of that is, hey, how about use it positively? We always hear people complaining about people aren't doing enough promos, and people are couple people I wanted to ask you specifically that come off the top of my head who really use it well. One, I don't know that. Look, if I get pushed back, you know who I'm going to say. Nobody that I know personally uses it better than Big Ben Bishop.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of people who it's funny don't like Ben Bishop's use of social media, and I'm like, I think it's fucking hilarious. I was gonna say, especially with what happened a few months ago with them winning belts, is I laugh every time I see Carly or Sean treating Ring of Honor 6-man championship belt like another. Like the photo shoot Carly did where he dressed up kind of like he's like a graduating senior, and he's like got his hair all like he's all taking senior pictures. And it was so friggin' funny. And I think they're using that in such a hilarious way. Hey, Ben Bishop, off the strength of his social media, is doing a show for me next month against Cruel. There are a lot of wrestlers who use their social media, and what they saw on TV this week, they're talking about their matches coming up in Jersey or Indiana or Massachusetts, and where they're traveling. And hey, I'm going to go wrestle for GCW in California. Bobby Flacco posting, hey, Big Bob's about to pull up, and he's posting an arena in Mexico. He's been touring down there for months. Don't be a geek on social media.
Yeah. Ben Bishop, if you want to follow the example, I tell people all the time, he was doing funny stuff on social media that this guy Jeff Jarrett saw, thought it was hilarious. Conrad Thompson saw it, and the next thing you know, he's booked on his show. He's in a program one night, but in a promo program with Jeff Jarrett. And then it's like, and then next thing you know, he's booked in the Northeast. He's booked all over. He's getting bookings, and if you don't think he is, he is. Like it's a super effective way. I think the problem is more people do more damage on their social media to their personas than they do. That's the hurt part.
That's the exact thing. So many get mad about something and they put it out on Facebook, or they tweet stupid things. And yeah, I have actually been like, I don't want to use that person based on their social media. Take that as you will.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, again, like you said, you're not a superstar pro wrestler who's, world famous, but then I'm not going to go there. I can't even say it. I don't even hurt a bunch of feelings. Mike from Pooler wants to know, did crossover appearances between promotions has helped the scene? We kind of touched this a little bit with your stuff crossing over. When you cross over, you are very specific, by the way. And I think this is probably, again, I hate to blow smoke, but this is a smart thing of you. It's always Matt Griffin of Action Wrestling. Like, a lot of other people are doing crossover, like, hey, but I don't even know what a crossover means, because if you don't own the promotion, how are you really crossing? You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. But when you're crossing over, I think it's where it helps the scene is if more people were, like if you're cutting a promo with Southern Fried Championship Wrestling's David Manders, like if you're kind of promoting the other brands, that's where they help. Just a guy jumping over here and wrestling over here, all right, one of my pet peeves, and I think you have to use it effectively here, is I've always said I wish more promotions defended titles all over Georgia, but I think it's got to be done in a certain way that it matters. Just showing up and defending it, I don't know that it does. I'll let you kind of put your take on that.
Yeah, it depends on how you do it, and I always want to make myself appear as big a deal as I possibly can. I'm often looking at seeing what people do and doing the opposite. You can tell, you see the way I dress at Southern Honor, wearing different variations of a suit, a tie, having different looks and trying to appear super professional because nobody else is doing that. When I come to Southern Fried, I'm very specifically coming out without a lot of energy. I'm coming out without music. I'm coming out very slowly because I'm letting crowd reaction build. When I come out in different places, it looks like I'm the CEO of Action Wrestling. I'm the kingpin of Georgia. I run this state. Those are just phrases that I try to go ahead and get over and use. And especially when you go into somebody's house where they're going to want to defend their home promoter like David Vanders or Gary Lamb, that's like instant heat. If you're a wrestler, you get booked elsewhere, and it's like, hey, I'm a happy, smiley face wrestler. You've got to you don't put a ceiling on yourself. I'm specifically, going in because to do certain things. I'm not going in to wrestle every month, but you always want to make yourself stand out. What can you do to stand out? And oftentimes it's just seeing what everybody else does and paying attention to what everyone else does and doing something different.
Enough said, right? Austin from Rome. This one is I think the one that'll probably get us, what's the biggest thing that needs to change in 2026 for Georgia wrestling to keep growing?
I think you've got to be grassroots, and you've got to promote in your local towns. That's it. You got to promote better. And that goes for me as well, by the way. To be clear, that's also a personal challenge for me. You've got to hit those places where you could get posters up. You've got to get flyers out. You've got to get a press release. You've got to get something in the local papers. You've got to work your social media. You've got to go ahead and draw better crowds. And that's what's going to keep the scene growing. You've got to have people who are willing to take not just their $15 or $20 and buy a ticket, but also take 3 or 4 hours out of their Friday or Saturday night to devote to attending your show. That's what it's going to be required. Otherwise, you're going to see promotions run less, close down venues that they're not doing well in, and the scene is going to kind of recede. That's what it is. That's what it is to me.
The reason I wanted to let you lead, I think the next question ties into my answer. Sean from Buford wants to know if you could erase one bad habit from Georgia indie wrestling heading into 26, what would it be? It's, to me, the same answer. I think people have to get out of their comfort zones. Look, we in our personal lives, in our relationships, and I think it's all goes, ties together. And what I mean by that is you can get in such a comfort zone that you're no longer putting your best efforts forward. You've always got to find the next hill to climb, the next challenge to take on. And I think sometimes as, people in our, like I said, in our business job, I'm good. I like the position I'm in. There's nothing really, what I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. Relationships, we get in a comfort zone. We stop trying to, take care of our significant other the way we probably should, or treat them, or, spoil them, whatever you want to call it. Wrestling, the same thing. Hey, our crowds are good. We're doing good. Let's just kind of do the same, wash, rinse, repeat every single month. And we think we're going to stay that way. If you're not growing, you're getting worse, in my opinion. If you're not evolving, you're going to get worse. Because, listen, in a positive way, for the longest time, Southern Honor Wrestling was the standard for production as far as everything goes. Now there's promotions out there that are, like, hey, we put ours up against anybody's, as far as because now cameras aren't as expensive as they were. You could shoot a show a completely different way. We talk about you look, Kraken's running a weekly show on YouTube. Coastal does a great job on YouTube. That's what I mean by you have to keep evolving. And I think a lot of people got in comfort zones. So when we saw the numbers get stagnant and even regress a little bit, I kind of felt like that was what I was thinking. Are a lot of people just comfortable and they're just wash, rinse, repeating every, week, month, whatever you want, whatever, bi-monthly, whatever they're running. I think that's a bad habit we need to get out of.
I think the bad habit that we need to get out of is, if certain people listening, it might piss them off, but they got to look at superstars. I'm sick of wrestlers coming and not standing out and not looking like stars. And that means going to the gym. That means spending money on your gear. That means having a presentable appearance at the merch table. That means that means if you're at the merch table coming across as some sort of premier athlete, when you're interacting with fans, try to act and look and be like a superstar, not just like an average guy. They're not paying to see a guy who has a job at a gas station or works at a retail store. They're paying to see somebody who is a professional wrestler who might be on TV one day. And sometimes I go to shows and I'm like, this person's got, a great look, and they're on their way. And sometimes I see people who just cut themselves short and they don't look like superstars. They don't do anything to stand out. And if you have a ton of charisma, that's something that's gonna play to your advantage. We haven't mentioned him yet, so there's a lot of wrestlers who that falls to do, but I'm gonna mention specifically just because I thought of him. Like Zach Buchanan is a young kid who's in shape. He's got hair, great mustache, charisma out. He do anything incredibly special, but he looks like a wrestler who is going to get paid to do this for a living one day, like his dad, like his brother, because he's got he's in shape. There's some wrestlers who don't give themselves any sort of advantage.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to ask, because you brought up Zach. Zach's somebody that I've been following for a while now, and specifically because I want you to expand on this. Goes back to I think a lot of this is with the wrestlers in their comfort zone as well. Hey, I'm a great wrestler. Somebody and I'll tell you off air, I looked at him and go, that's great. It doesn't matter. There's tons of great wrestlers out there. Do we like you? Do we hate you? That's all that really matters as far as the grand scheme of things. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Zach Buchanan, this is why I'm tying this back to this. I don't like pulling the curtain back a lot sometimes, but here we are going to do it for this specific example. Everything you said about Zach, 100% I agree with. He could have just said, you know what? I'm going to be the golden boy of the promotion. I'm the baby face because of dad, whatever. But he took this gamble. He took this risk. And and I'm throwing air quotes around this, he turned his back on his father, and he's going to build this group that he has built over there specifically at Bullpen to basically, I'm going to try this. I want to do, why? It gives him a different layer, and it's just something change. And by the way, folks, the reason why you want to do this, you need to show the people that are above, the powers that be in bigger shows and even nationally, I can do whatever you ask me to do. Like, if they see you as the white meat babyface your entire career, they will question you, and you would agree with this. Yeah, but what if we have to flip him at some point? What does he look like? They're going to know because they're going to see this. And by the way, he knocked it out of the park so far. So kudos to Zach Buchanan, the rebirth, and all of that group, kind of like being comfortable, like we're going to do this. I'm eager to, here's the thing. They have me eager to see where it goes. A guy who watches just more wrestling than I care to admit on a weekly basis. If you can make me eager to watch where it goes, you've done a good job. So, and I'll kind of come back to you, and I know that was a sidebar, but you triggered my thoughts on Zach Buchanan being out of his comfort zone and going, let's try this and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You want to attract eyes to you. So that's the bad habit I would erase, is not coming across like a superstar in whatever form you being a superstar would be.
You can still be, hey, I'm a superstar. I mean, we talked about Carly Bravo on the street cutting a social media video. I saw he was doing a live. Somebody walked up to him and said, can I get your autograph? And he was like, oh, yeah. And the guy goes, what do you do? And he was like, you don't know what I do? He goes, no, but I could tell you were somebody. That's it. You know what I mean? That's what you want. And you could still be approachable. You could still be, hey, you can engage with your fans, but look, hey, I'm a star. That's, I think, kind of hopefully what you're getting for. Last question. It's Nick from Statesboro. Promise it's not me. Nick from Statesboro asks, if you had to describe Georgia Indy Wrestling in 2025 with one word, what would it be and why?
Well, I'm glad we got to the end, because, man, we've been going for a while, and I love the chemistry we have. We can just rap for an hour and a half.
Yeah, exactly.
but I got real world things to do shortly. But I'm gonna have a boring answer, and it's gonna be the word stability. I think that you've had, there's been promotions who've definitely flourished, and different promotions who haven't done as well. I mean, we've hardly talked about Classic City, and they're running New Year's Eve. They run shows. They've run shows in Nashville. They've run shows, that are unique and that are not near their home base. And they're adding to that, and then so you have promotions that are doing what they do, and that's what Classic City does. Is they have a home venue in Athens, and they are expanding. You have Action. I mean, myself, I've got 2 regular venues, and I've got a lot of school shows, and I'm trying to add to it. You have One Fall, who is doing what they do. So even though we have had a bunch of different promotions reseed, you do have a lot of promotions that are doing really good business out there. So I think if you look at it top to bottom, all 30 or so promotions, you have Mucha Lucha, who draws their 12 to 1,500 every 3 or 4 months. I think stability. By the way, hold on.
Probably. And, they've picked up a couple venues. They're running out of state. They're adding more shows, which was a brand new thing for them.
Yep. He did South Carolina and Florida Thanksgiving week. Yep. So he's working. Ricardo is working his business. He's the best promoter in the state. I would say stability is probably my word for
that. Mine's going to be evolution, and what I mean by that is, I think we're seeing the business as a whole, the way it's done, change. You would probably agree, with the way the venues fell off. People that were willing to evolve their business, they are growing, and doing better. Look, we talked a little bit like what Viral did. They had to move locations. They got a new home. They evolved. They changed. They rolled with it. Boom. They're off to the races. Everybody left Apex dead, right? When it was next level, boom, they evolve. They make the necessary changes. They're growing. Crack it. Again, all these things changing and evolving. I think that's why I said evolution. We even talk about it at the top tier of promotions across Georgia. It's not the same list definitively as it was 3 years ago. It's now that it's a shakeup. And I think the businesses that are willing to evolve are going to grow. And sometimes evolution is more venues. Sometimes it's changing the product. If you don't evolve, you will die. If you just, I think we're at that state of where we look across the state, the Georgia promotions that are growing typically are doing something different. It's funny, I had a phone conversation with a promoter. Yeah, we'll call him promoter last night. And it was like, hey, these are some things I want to go do differently. What do you think of those? And it's like, I like them from a fan perspective. I'm a good sounding board as a fan because that's what I am. And I'll tell people all the time. I have had people reach out to me. If we did this, what would you think? I would do this, but I'm not your target demo. It's probably going to work for your target. You know what I mean? I can also be realistic enough to say your crowd's going to love it. My age, probably not going to, but I'm not your target demo, so run with that. But anyway, so evolution, the change, I think that's the key. We're going to see, we fell from 43 down to like 26 by the end of the year as far as who we were tracking on a regular basis. Again, evolution and the change. Speaking of evolution and change, if we record next week, the Tapped In show, it'll still be the same format come January the 7th. Format will be changing. The headlines will debut. The Indy Rewind will essentially go away. A lot of other things. I'll go into that some next week. If I don't, I'll kind of explain it a little bit on social media or something as well. But change is a-coming. There's also a big announcement for the Tapped Out show. Going to make that on tomorrow's show, so you got to listen to that one to figure that one out. But, yeah, I know we both have lots of things we got to get to, so I'm not going to hold you up a whole lot longer, if at all. Anything else, final thoughts before we wrap and get out of here on 2025?
It's been a good year. I mean, didn't even address the fact that we got flown to do me and my partners with the Action Dean shows to do shows with Ring of Honor, which is wild, and just continuing to grow the business. It's been a crazy year looking back for me personally, for Action personally. The matches that I did with David Manders and Sunny Days and Gary Lamb and other places felt, they felt special that we were able to do something really, really cool. Action is good. There's a lot of promoters who are working together and talking and sharing ideas, and I think it's in a good place right now. I think the business is a whole is in a good place, and I feel very good about that.
So do I. So that's our look back at 2025. So, well, man, I appreciate you coming on, and I guess we look forward to 2026.
We'll see you at the matches.